mechanical cooling has actually caused us to close up our buildings. And what that's done is actually disengaged us from nature and the outdoors. We no longer have patios to sit out on with your neighbour, which is that human contact, which is a big part of mental health.
There are dire warnings that New South Wales will be hit by increasingly extreme weather.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began.
Figures show this July was the single hottest month in recorded history.
Australia sweltered through its hottest spring on record.
Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent.
It's the rate that's of great concern.
And what do you put that rate down to?
Oh, it's human activity.
We have everything we need. Some still doubt that we have the will to act, but I say the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Climactic, the people's voice on climate change.
Hello Mark, hello listeners. Yes, the episode today started with Phil Wilkinson, a long-time member of AIRAH, a non-profit advocate for the, and I'll just take a deep breath here listeners, heating, ventilation, air conditioning and cooling and refrigeration industry in Australia.
Well done, Rich, or from now on, for the sake of us, just HVAC&R.
Now that would be nice, Mark, yes.
Both that group and Phil especially are pushing the industry to tackle the big problems that have arisen because of the ubiquity of temperature control.
Yep.
It's everywhere, especially its massive impact on greenhouse gas emissions and potential for misuse in creating unsustainable buildings and our lifestyles.
That's incredible. Now, you're probably listening to this show in a building or a car.
Or you've eaten food today from your fridge or from a supermarket chiller.
And there's an industry that makes that all possible.
It's huge and complex and incredibly invisible, although we all benefit from it every day.
So what is this hidden industry, Mark, and why does that sound so, to be honest, menacing?
It's called HVAC&R, and it's the glue that holds our built world together. And if you want to point out some of the downsides of the way we've built homes, cities, our transport, and even international trade in its entirety, it's a pretty big cause of all that.
So I suppose it's hiding on purpose?
It's not, actually, not at all. In fact, there are some in the industry eager to now burst out of the plant room and start telling their stories. And how, in a real surprise to me, they've got the opportunity today to stop and start to reverse some of the most severe damage to our climate and atmosphere.
That's incredible. Okay, Mark, don't bury the lead. What is it?
I'm not telling.
Oh.
But luckily, Phil is. All right, so I'm at the library at the Dock Studios with Phil Wilkinson. Now, Phil is a guy I just met last week. I've had the pleasure of many hours of talking to him already, though. As you'll see from this interview, just like me, Phil's a very good talker. It's a very good skill to have, Phil. A listener of the show, Lee Baker, introduced us because we were doing some parallel things.
Thanks for having us along to the wooden box down in Docklands that I've never been to, the library. I heard a lot about it, so it's nice to be down here, and what an amazing studio they've got.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice box. I mean, we're not in summer yet, so it's not a hot box yet, but it feels like spring outside, so that'll be right around the corner.
Yeah,
but
luckily, it's air conditioned though, so hopefully...
I was going to say, luckily we'll be staying nice and cool thanks to the marvels of HVAC and refrigeration. So, Phil, you work at AIRAH now, and you have for quite a while. Can you tell us about what AIRAH is and what you do there?
Yeah, so AIRAH's we're a not-for-profit organisation and very much moving towards being an environmental organisation where our membership is from all over the country and work all through the value chain that keeps food fresh, keeps blood getting to hospitals, and also keeps us comfortable in buildings. And it's the hidden industry, and that's the air conditioning refrigeration industry. So people never think about it except when it's not working. So one of my passions is how do we make that visible? How do we tell that story and humanise it so we can start to realise some of the impact that we can have on reducing and reversing climate change? We do a number of things for our members, magazines, conferences. So we take all the smart stuff that they do, repackage it and put it out so other people can get smart. So it's brilliant to be on the show, trialling another way of getting out to people to help them understand.
That's fantastic, Phil. I like it right before you even said what the name of the group was or anything, or the industry really. You gave some of the effects of the industry, keeping blood cool, getting fresh food to us, keeping us comfortable in our houses on this very arid continent. I don't think a lot of other people in an industry would kind of lead with the effects of the industry because it's probably more well understood. There is this kind of complex within the HVAC and refrigeration industry that you guys are the invisible industry. So you have to say, hey, just straight up front, here's what we do for you guys, because you, the layperson, don't really understand this industry. And that's fascinating. So AIRAH is the Australian Institute of Refrigeration, Air Conditioning,
and
Heating. I understand there's a bit of a divide between air conditioning and ventilation and heating on one side, and then refrigeration on the other. So I think people who work in refrigeration must really enjoy that in AIRAH, at least, refrigeration comes first in the acronym.
Yeah, look, refrigeration was where it all started. So back probably over 100 years ago now, refrigeration was invented in Geelong by an entrepreneurial Scottish guy called James Harrison. He was working on his print press, so he was an editor down at the Geelong Advertiser, and noticed that the ether evaporating off the print plates when he was cleaning them was actually causing them to cool down. So he's a smart fella. He's put some dots together, created an ice making machine. So the refrigeration aspect came first. Australia was looking for ways we could export sheep back to around the world. So we got great farming land, but we were a long way from markets. So that was really where it all kicked off. Air conditioning has a really interesting background as well. And again, it was tied in with the printing industry as well. Willis Carrier over in the US was looking at a way of reducing the humidity impact on printing presses, on printing paper, because the inks weren't sticking. So he came up with the first air conditioning system. And what we've seen probably over the last 40, 50 years is a real air conditioning become the bigger known side of the industry. But at the heart of every air conditioner is a refrigeration system. And now we see the refrigeration is very hidden and serving lots of different value chains. But air conditioning is something we all enjoy, but we don't always think about the impact from the emissions. We just know that when it doesn't work, it gets hot.
That's right. Yeah, we don't think about it very much, and it's really good. You gave kind of due credit to refrigeration for what it's meant in spawning all these other things afterwards. What do you think Australia would look like if we'd never come up with these amazing technologies? So, I mean, there's so many good things the industry's done for us, and it's probably hard to imagine what life would be like in especially cities without it. But there's the dark side, isn't there?
Yeah. Look, I think to your first question, what would Australia be like? I think Tasmania would be very crowded. Probably switch the lights off on the mainland. There's a lot of places you wouldn't be able to inhabit. But yeah, the dark side. So we've been doing all these great things as engineers, but when we actually look at emissions impact, it's massive. So in Australia alone, we use about a quarter of all the generated electricity through refrigeration and air conditioning systems.
That is staggering.
It's massive, yeah.
A quarter of it's already gone to refrigeration and HVAC.
Absolutely, and no one thinks about it. So I get paid to think about it. So I've been thinking about it for about 15 years. And you start to look at what refrigeration enables, and it's everywhere. I think someone mentioned the figure of when milk comes to the table, it's already gone through 12 steps of being cooled, processed into your fridge, into the supermarket, in your air-conditioned car to get home. And when you start thinking about it like that, you go, wow, that is a big impact. And that's just milk alone.
And the farmer's vat to the
right from the cow.
Milk trucks. Yeah. I mean, again, in hot parts of Australia, you have some coolers running for the cows. And some milking stress going on. You don't want that. As a layperson, I can understand that the amount of power being consumed by the industry is huge, collectively. But rather than saying it's the industry consuming almost a quarter of the power in Australia, it's a lot of us individuals as well with our own personal home heating and cooling that collectively in aggregate make up this huge number. But other than the power use that we're doing, that's bad in Australia right now, particularly because of our power generation mixture. We've got a lot of coal plants still in our grid. But if that was all renewables and we're just consuming this power to heat and cool our homes, is there any detriment there, or is there something I'm missing?
Where I certainly come from, where our organisation comes from, you have to look at what you're using it for in the first place. So from a building's point of view, get the building built properly. So it's built for environment. You keep the heat out in the first place. You have it oriented properly. So talk about passive solar design. So absolutely minimise the amount of heat that's coming into a space. Then choose a system that is properly sized, is very efficient for when you need it most. Get it installed by someone capable and competent. Big bit we don't do here is we don't commission plant properly to make sure it's running as it's meant to. And then the other really hidden bit is the maintenance side. So people set these things, forget them. I've been thinking about these things and looking at them for a long time. and you start to pull some of the vents back and have a look in the fans, there's a lot of stuff growing on coils, which are very moist and damp, mould, dirt on fans. And when you start thinking back to where that comes from, it's the dirt and the skin that's in the room that gets drawn into those things. So
it's being recirculated into the air we're all breathing in the office building, for example.
That's it, yeah.
Wow, that's some gnarly stuff.
One of the tricks for us is how do we make that humanised or make it so that the layperson can understand it. So they start to go, oh, I wonder if that's been cleaned. So it's not just the health impact, it's also the environmental and the energy impact as well.
With my exposure to China, this advent of home air quality sensors and air purifiers that'll actually let you know, hey, there's a lot of stuff I'm filtering out of the air right now. I'm your little humble air purifier trying to keep your kid from getting asthma. Danger. As that kind of technology becomes more and more prevalent and gets out into office buildings, is that something that you're excited about for the industry as letting lay people know that, hey, that there is elements to your air that shouldn't be here, that is a byproduct of you not taking care of your HVAC system? Because this isn't running as designed.
It's interesting. It reminds me of a story of a time when I was in London. And I looked at buildings and there was air conditioning there. And I'm like, why on earth would you air condition a building in London? Surely the climate is okay to have the windows open. But then you start thinking about the pollution in the air and you've got the fine particles that are in the air. And as I've come to learn about the industry, which I'd never ever seen or thought of before, you go, oh, that's why they're air conditioned. So that a conditioning part of the air is actually removing the dirt, which is the ventilation part. Cooling is another part of air conditioning. I think with your question on sensors, that's anything you can measure, then you can start asking questions. Carbon dioxide is a good one. Often you hear about schools that have got their classrooms closed up, gets to afternoon, the carbon dioxide levels can start to get quite high with the kids in there. Schools tend not to open the windows for some reason. And the first indicator of that is the noise levels going up. So we've read some research in Germany where they go, okay, we'll let the kids out, flush the room out with fresh air. And then they come back in and that concentration comes back.
With the CO2 levels in school classrooms, I was just thinking while you were describing that, oh, that's the afternoon doze period. Yep. That's why all the students are getting quiet and dozy because the CO2 levels are going up. And then you said, oh, the noise levels are increasing. I realized, oh, that's the teacher yelling to get the students to wake up from the afternoon doze. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand, beyond just the power consumption of the industry, what are the direct emissions things we should be worried about, and what are you guys trying to tackle as an industry?
So there's two aspects to the emissions, Mark. One is the energy that we use. So that's the indirect emissions. The direct emissions that you alluded to are when refrigerant itself is released into the atmosphere. So as an industry, we came up with the CFCs, which are chlorofluorocarbons, which were damaging to the ozone layer. I won't ask you to
say that 10 times fast. Although if anybody could, it would be you. But
yeah.
Chlorofluorocarbons. Very good.
Chlorofluorocarbons. There you go, twice. So they were to replace really dangerous chemicals, methyl bromides and quite nasty toxic substances. Then we found out after 30 years there was a problem with the ozone layer, so we went, okay, let's get rid of them. So these are the synthetic refrigerants. Then we went to what we call HCFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons.
I thought the first one was tough.
So what we did with those was really reduce the ozone depleting potential of those. The current generation of refrigerants we went to is called the HFCs or hydrofluorocarbons. And globally, we're just seeing a phase down of those starting. So we replaced the ozone-depleting gases with really, really high global warming potential gases. So a typical gas now might be 2,000 to 4,000 times more potent in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide.
Jeez. 2,000 to 4,000.
And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for us as engineers to make that understandable to people that are listening to your show. It's easy for an engineer that's rational and saying, oh, you should make sure your system doesn't leak and make sure you've got a proper refrigeration mechanic doing it. We haven't been able to tell that story particularly well about what that means to the environment, and that an individual can make an impact by doing it properly.
So is that one of the major things we're looking out for, is leaks in existing systems?
Leaks is critical that we make sure they don't happen. It's illegal to knowingly let refrigerant leak. The other thing is if they do leak, the actual system becomes more inefficient, which means we don't get the cooling it's meant to. It runs less efficiently. So it's got like a double banger.
Yikes. And then, so we've got leaks, which I can imagine is a huge thing, because I've worked in many an office where, unfortunately, the reception person just becomes a catch-all for all maintenance issues as well. And if you're finding, the AC is taking a little bit longer to heat up in the morning, or the cooling's not as effective as it was a few months ago, it gets sort of told to the receptionist once, twice, 3 times, and eventually somebody gets called, and eventually there's a call out. And if they get told, this is going to be a big bill, well, let's not do anything about it now. Let's wait in a couple months until the new budget rolls over. And it's just a complete lack of priority and urgency around these things, I guess, stemming from lack of communication. So there's someone like me agitating in the office like, this is illegal. I'm going to report you.
That's if it leaks out of the actual plant room. Typically, in the office yourself, it might not be cooling as it's supposed to. What we see a lot of in typical complaints is things get just temporarily fixed. It's critical to get someone to come in and find what the root cause is of those issues. So a good company will come in and ask all the different people about the different aspects. So it might be you in where you are, someone that looks after, say, a janitor, and the different people that use the space, and through that go and find the root cause. Now, that may be a leak in the refrigerant system, or it may be that the programming's wrong in the building management system. So it's really critical, because they're complex systems, it's critical to understand that they deliver service for people, so understand all the different aspects to get to that root cause.
So a technician working in the space is a little bit like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, he's taught to diagnose, problem solve, and that's one of the great things about the technician side of the industry. It's not just turn up, put some wires together for, say, an electrician. There's all these different aspects. There's a bit of electrical, bit of plumbing, bit of controls. So it's fascinating sector.
That's a fantastic kind of overview of the industry, Phil, and the sort of the people that work in it. So I'm kind of curious, what inspired you to be one of those people? So like you've got all these facets to it. You have to be really technically minded and then good with people a bit to diagnose a problem. But you're definitely one of the people. What made you get interested in doing this kind of work?
That's a really good question. So I'm from Yorkshire in the north of England, where, to be quite honest, I'd never actually heard the term air conditioning or refrigeration. I'm sure it was around me keeping beer. Actually, we drink warm beer, so maybe that's not a good example.
That's actually a terrible example. It should never exist.
So I'm sure it would have been used, but it's not something I ever thought of as an occupation. I went off to university. I was good at maths and physics. So I went to do engineering, mechanical engineering, which is what my mates were doing. At the time, the trade barriers were coming down in Europe, and there was an opportunity to do my degree with French. So off I go to France to study mechanical engineering in French, which opened my eyes up to travelling. Met all these international students. Didn't really know what I wanted to do when I finished my degree. So I thought, well, I'll go to Australia. Some of my friends have been there. And I wanted to get some work experience. I didn't just want to go to Sydney and work in a bar. I could have done that in London. So I got out, pounded the pavements of the Gold Coast, where I was staying with some relatives. And a guy from Leeds in Yorkshire actually hired me, doing CAD drafting, so computer-aided drafting. And it happened to be in a building services firm. So I was always a bit of a nosy bugger and always asking what I was drawing, what the red lines were on the page. The electrical drawings were all pretty straightforward, single line drawings, but the mechanical drawings were quite complex. So the mechanical engineers would show me the catalogues. Then they started to take me out on site, taking me to meetings. And it was an area that really fascinated me because it was complex and interactions, and it was about people.
Just to clarify if I can there, Phil. So the mechanical side of the drawings you're looking at, was there any elements to it beyond HVAC and refrigeration, or is it mainly mechanical relates to the...
So we talk about mechanical services in a building as the aircon and the ventilation, so car park exhaust systems, kitchen exhaust systems. We were doing a lot of hotel and apartment work.
Because the only other thing I could think of being vaguely mechanical, and you're going to laugh at me for this, is like, what's something else mechanical in a building? And I was like, a garage door opener.
Yep.
Like, would that classify? Or
so that's
miscellaneous.
It wouldn't come under our space. So mechanical building services, I guess, is the full term.
Yep. Which for these purposes and in the industry is synonymous with heating and ventilation and cooling.
Yep. Ducts and pipes.
Yeah, thank you very much for the clarification there. Now I learned something. That's good. Beyond learning about HVAC&R, now I know that means mechanical services in buildings.
That's it. So I kind of fell into the industry, and that's the thing I found in the industry. People, it's too much of a coincidence A lot of people fall into this industry, and we tend to be quite introverted, deep thinkers. And I actually think it's an industry that attracts people that maybe gravitate towards that. People get quite comfortable working in this hidden industry. The next generation of people coming through are a lot more collaborative and a lot more communicative and can explain things. Certainly that was the thing I noticed.
But you're not that way.
Yes, after about 7 years, so I was sponsored by the organisation I worked for up on the Gold Coast to become a graduate engineer. After about 5 or 6 years of wrestling with architects about where I was going to squeeze an air conditioner on the balcony, my life force was ebbing away a bit. One of those crises points in your life where you go, what am I doing? I looked around and I didn't really feel very inspired by the people that were around me. So an opportunity came up with the Institute, AIRAH, to work on the industry. So I've been working in that role 15 years, and really I get to work with the best in the industry, are really top of the game in their fields, and I get to help translate that or collaborate with them to work with the other team members or create guidelines or work on Australian standards or the building code. So it's really quite a privileged position. So I get a very broad umbrella overview of the industry, its issues, its challenges, but also the impact we can do have.
So talking about the impacts of the industry, at what point did you kind of start to relate what was going on in the industry to an awareness about the fact that there is this thing out there called human-driven climate change, and that there was a link between what we're doing to the planet and the fact the industry is involved in that?
As soon as I started working at AIRAH, we were doing work with the Commonwealth Australian Greenhouse Office on training for energy efficiency. So the organisation had been really progressive in its thinking, recognising we were a real energy hog. And to me, it's just, it's quite strange that people talk about sustainability. Not strange, but people talk about sustainability. For me, it's dumb if we waste things. So being from Yorkshire, which is north of England, I'm quite frugal. So I don't like to use more than I'm meant to. And when people say, "Oh, you're this sustainability guy," I'm like, I don't hug trees or anything. I just don't like wasting things. So that's more where I come from. It's just dumb to waste what you don't need to waste.
I'm really struck by the fact that AIRAH hasn't put like short-termism right at the front of its interests. It's not saying, hey, industry, if you can sell more units into a building, if this building can have more AC, more heating needs, but more ductwork in, that's the best thing for us if we can just get the highest contracts and the most work we can available. But instead, AIRAH hasn't taken that tact. It's been talking about emissions and about sustainability for quite a while. What is it about this group that represents an industry that's able to have that perspective instead of the let's just sell more quicker and make more money right now?
As you say, it's very much a long-term view. If we look at what the impact of climate change is going to be, we're going to have hotter days, we're going to have bigger hailstorms, we're going to have floods, we're going to have more humidity in some spaces. If we keep on down the track we're going by putting more emissions into the air by more kit, that's just going to create a cycle effect of making it worse. So what we need to do is create buildings now, and in the refrigeration sector, that do a lot of the work themselves, so keep the heat out of the buildings so that they don't rely as heavily on a mechanical services system, so that if for some reason the power goes out or one of these other impacts happens, then there's more hope of getting them back up and get them working. As an engineer in the industry, you're actually providing a service. Engineers are all about people, but we forget that sometimes. People don't buy ductwork and they don't buy chillers. They buy comfort. And they don't think about that, but that's the service that our industry provides. And as engineers, we look at a building as a system. So how do we provide that comfort for the occupants and people in the building in the most effective and efficient way? So we need to start working a lot better with builders and with architects. Architects have kind of become a bit disempowered because of air conditioning. We've been able to throw glass boxes up. You look at all the skylines of the major cities in Australia, and it blows me away. They all look the same. Glass buildings. Because you can put air conditioning in, throw a lot of energy at it, and you get a comfortable outcome. What we need to see is, and what we hopefully will see through the building codes, is step change, real transformation, and we're hopeful that is going to be on the cards, so that you can no longer build buildings like they look today. So they're going to re-empower the architects and start to get some of that vernacular design back into the Australian context, which I think is really exciting.
Fantastic. Like, from the outside, I would not think there was this much thinking going on about it, and then so much action. You know, you're involved with an industry group, but you're also actively reimagining the industry. You don't just want to keep writing the same industry as long as you can. You're evolving while you have the choice to, which is great. And you personally have been really active in this as well, with trying to collaborate across not only other industries here in Australia, but connecting that HVAC and refrigeration industry globally as well, to sort of communicate what some places are doing well versus what some places maybe aren't doing so well, and actually letting them know they can be doing a lot better rapidly. So can you tell us a little bit about the initiatives you're sort of putting in place to create this, not fraternity, but this collection,
we call it an ecosystem. So it's going to be organic. So this comes from, I guess, my love of causing a bit of mischief, having a bit of fun. I talk about superpowers. So my superpower is I love to connect people. I love listening to people's stories, and I love connecting them with other people that I think they can do awesome things with. So I'm all about introducing people together that are more awesome than me, so that I can learn from them having a conversation. And this is a concept I've come to realize over the years. Been very inspired through the work that Paul Hawken has done on Project Drawdown. He came over here to Australia and talked about the Drawdown project, and that they found that refrigerant management was the number one action to reverse climate change. It made me laugh because his presentation's got all this beautiful imagery of families in Peru that have now got solar panels on their roofs so that the smoke from fires isn't poisoning their kids, and other things about windmills and cows eating kelp on the beach. And then he sort of cuts to refrigerant management and said how disappointed he was because it just wasn't sexy. So I'm
burn.
So I'm sitting in the audience going, I know that, I'm owning it. Because that's been my life for 15 years, trying to come up with that narrative so that people go, I get it. So we've been talking to Canberra, to our politicians for, say, 15 years about maintaining, commissioning.
But they just keep changing.
They just keep changing.
Well, that's the only line I'll drop in about the current day's events.
Absolutely. And we're living in extraordinary times. There's a lot of people with a lot of voices at Canberra. So the idea of this global ecosystem that you asked me about is that we can actually democratise around the globe to tackle what actually are global issues. So, climate change is a big global issue. And in the words of Paul Hawken, it's about being fearless and about being unreasonable. We're the people in this collective that want to make a change. The other bit that I've realised, though, is that as engineers, we're really great at hanging out in plant rooms and talking tech and acronyms. And we've got the number one opportunity to reverse climate change. So I go, okay, so we've got this massive opportunity, but we're massively complex and technical. So my thinking is that gives us the right to have as much fun as we can, work with storytellers and make our stories as human as possible. So the concept that we're starting with is going, okay, let's put the engineers with storytellers, but also pair them up with social scientists to actually understand the people and the context of every situation, rather than just saying, use this standard because it is good and it will give you this outcome. So I've got a really, really strong belief that we've actually got to work across those disciplines with experts like yourself that can tell the story. And my industry, let's just get on with it in the plant room, but let's do this co-working around the globe. And as you say, it's, let's surface some of these stories, these brilliant stories, so we can take some of the risk, the perceived risk out of the problems we got out there, and let's learn from other people. Let's use those case studies, and let's be fearless together.
Phil, we're about to go into an excerpted interview you did with Paul Hawken yourself, you and Mark Vender from AIRAH, who's the editor of the great HVAC&R Nation publication you guys put out as well. Do you have any sort of framing thoughts or anything before we go into the interview?
It was a real privilege to have some time with Paul Hawken. I was vaguely aware of the Drawdown book in 2017, but I had my head down on other projects. It kind of went over the top of my radar. Then someone tagged me in a LinkedIn conversation saying he was coming out this year and that AIRAH had been really proactive in refrigerant management, and I was like, that's a bit strange, because the person that tagged me in, I didn't even know her. It was Elaine Stanley. So I did a bit of rummaging around and reread the Drawdown work and saw this refrigerant management as number one, so as the number one action. So I was like, I've got to meet this guy. So I put my feelers out to see where he was going to be, and I was lucky enough to sit in with two of his talks. He's an amazing human being. You'll hear it in his voice. He's just very, very soulful, spiritual, and you just want to listen to him, and he's a wonderful storyteller. When he talked about the Drawdown project and doing the math, it made me it made me think about a project we'd done, I talk about it being accidental. We'd accidentally collected all of the solutions to reducing emissions in our industry, but we didn't do the math and we didn't tell the story. So I was like, this was where the inspiration came from. So I said to Paul, I asked him a question. I said, have you thought about a cross-sectoral drawdown across the HVAC&R sector? And he just looked at me and said, why don't you do it? And I was like, yeah, why not?
It already did have to work.
Yeah. And the other bit, I saw him the second time and I asked him the bit about behaviour change. I said, have you thought about looking at the behaviour change aspect, the social and psychological side? And again, he just said, why don't you do it? So both Mark Vendor and myself watched this and were really excited afterwards. And we got the opportunity to interview Paul after he'd just left Australia. So we thought, well, it's going to be great to get his insights about what he took away from Australia, which was some really wonderful things. But also, again, just to pitch this concept of cross-sectoral air-conditioned refrigeration drawdown. And he was still keen. So we're writing to the Drawdown team to explain why we want to do it, but also the things that we need help from them.
So the gauntlet has been thrown down by none other than Paul Hawken. As he says to Phil, if you want to see a change in our worlds, or in your industry, in your locality, why not do it yourself? So Phil had the opportunity to get Paul on the phone and ask him some questions about his 19 days in Australia in early 2018, and how you'd go about starting a drawdown-associated project in, say, the HVAC&R sector.
Now that you're at the end of this tour of Australia, how have your presentations been received, and what are some of the observations and stories that you'll take away from Australia?
My observation, which I shared this morning at Wildorn, Sydney, was that Australia is a lot further ahead than it thinks it is with respect to action on global warming and connection, activism, funding, targets. It's a lot further ahead. I think it actually happens a lot in the Antipodes, because you're kind of remote and then you overachieve because you don't know what the limits are.
That's one of the things I noticed when I jumped on a plane to America, Paul. Is you realise Australia's a long way from anywhere, and it's not on the way to anywhere. So we live in this bubble, as you sort of allude to.
Right.
We don't know what we can't do.
And to your favour, and that's true about New Zealand as well. And there's a kind of a gumption and inventiveness and I don't know where to stop kind of quality, I'm just going to keep going, that I think is overlooked, because you're comparing yourselves to yourselves in a sense, and as an outsider, as somebody coming in here for being here 19 days, and, I don't learn anything when my mouth is open, but you do talk and you get questions and you get people give you the literature from their groups. I've heard from, academics, from professors, from government people, from, the municipal level on up. And I'm really impressed. It doesn't mean you can slow down. Shouldn't do that. But I mean, I'm very impressed with what's going on in Australia. And I know Australia has the same sort of actually it's not the same. It has a dysfunctional federal government, as do we. It's actually, compared to ours, yours seems very functional, actually. But I mean, out of touch, and in some ways, and more in the throes of, big corporates, and especially in the mining industry. So, that's something you have to deal with, where we have the federal government again and again and again on our country. A the Congress elected by the people, for the people, by the people, of the people, right? I mean, passing laws and signing regulations that most Americans actually disfavor, are against. And I think there's some of that here too, So that's a governing system that doesn't really work for the times we're in. And so just as here, but I think also in America, you see tremendous initiative on the municipal level, on the mayoral level, in the council level. So all in all, I think Australia's doing a great job. I think it's a real leader. If it was an island big island, mind you, but off California, I mean, everybody would be going there and saying, why don't you do like the Australians are doing, but, people don't know what you're doing.
Cool. I mean, you mentioned Take Two when we were here together and the Bendigo Drawdown. There's two examples of these local municipal initiatives. Are there any other stories that you came across as you were travelling around Australia?
Australia Ethical, just as a company, you look at Sustainable Living Tasmania with already commitments, within the next decade or so to, basically be 100% renewable and now going beyond that. You go to Beyond Zero, that organization is, you just have organizations, Climate Works, with Anna Skarbek is doing, John Thwaites, I think, is the chairman. I mean, you just have organizations and people here who they're certainly not overachieving, but they're overachieving in comparison to what's happening in most of the world, by no question. And also you see a kind of a local enthusiasm. In Bendigo, there was a Q&A session, and then there was one more question, and somebody got that question, but a woman insisted that she get another question. She was insisting, and everybody kind of knows each other, so it wasn't like you could say no, But anyway, what her question was, how many of you raise your hand? I have the photograph of it. I should send it to you. How many of you, raise your hand, will write and get in touch with the Premier, Andrew? I forget the name, but anyway, the Premier.
Daniel Andrews.
And tell him that you want Victoria to be a drawdown state. Wow. And the whole audience raised their hand. It was so emblematic, obviously, if I'm going to give a talk in Bendigo, that's who's going to come, but still, there was this connection between people and organizations and companies and business and schools and that I really experienced firsthand, and maybe it's because at home I don't. I think it's special here. I think it's more special than you know.
That's interesting. I guess you explained at the talk that the solutions are already here, the actions are underway. But given that Drawdown has presented it as a plan, what do you think needs to happen next for us to reach Drawdown sooner rather than later? I mean, these sorts of events seem to me like they're helping, that they're bringing people together, they're channeling that energy. But I'm not sure what you see as the sort of the next steps or the requirements to move forward.
Well, I don't know what the next steps are for Australia, that's for sure. And we have to, we did say it's a plan. It's not our plan. We didn't propose the plan. Drawdown is not the progenitor of the plan. What we're saying is we found a plan, that the collective wisdom of humanity has a plan collectively that even it doesn't know about. And in a sense, it's like holding up a mirror and looking at it and saying, what do you see? There it is. So we are not the sponsors or, promoters of a plan. What we want to do, and I think will do now, is implant the model into Australia in at least 4 places, maybe 5 or 6 or more. And then that model be used in a regional way, which is really what the model is for. There's no such thing. It's a global model. It's fascinating data, no question about it, but there's no such thing as a global. It doesn't exist, And what exists is, towns, states, provinces, shires, and farms and people. And so I believe ANU, RMIT, Monash, the University of Melbourne will be housing or domiciling the model, and that model then becomes, we don't control it at all. I mean, I want to say your model, but it belongs to that, that place and those students and those people have access to it, and which I hope is everybody. And then the model can be used to basically specify those solutions which are more applicable to Australia or to certain parts of it. It can be used to benchmark, it can be used to measure the costs more accurately, because Australia costs are different than Belgium's, different than Boston's, different than Japan's. And so the costs become more accurate, and it can be used, as I say, as a way to measure progress. Along with that, and I don't know if we spoke about that night at RMIT, but we're working with a fabulous individual who is making airships. Did we talk about the airships?
Yeah, the ones that can actually analyse what's going on the ground in terms of emissions. Is that right?
Exactly, down to GPS fence lines. So what happened is that will be married to the model, so that when there is one or more, there'll be more than one, but for Australia, then the model will not only have what's going on the ground in terms of solutions, but also have real-time data on what the results are. And it can't measure sequestration, but it can measure the difference between one type of land use or farm use or raising use and another, very starkly so. And I was just looking at the telly, was it last night, looking at the floods in Canberra, and people were all going about like, oh, the drains, we told you the drains were too small. It wasn't, it has nothing to do with drains. It has everything to do with the perverse way the land has been used around there over a century. And it can't take up water. And it wasn't, the flood of a century. It's a century of misuse of the land. So real-time data coupled with the models means that not just Australia, but anybody who has the model and has that connected to readouts that are real-time for a city, a block, a country, a province, a shire, whatever it is, will be able to know exactly where you are, or that entity is going. And right now, as I said, we're flying blind. We really don't know. All we have is a Mauna Loa in Hawaii. That's it. And obviously on the ground measurements of NOx and SOx and pollutants and stuff. But we really do not have any other way of calibrating, measuring, and understanding what humanity is doing on the planet and the impact it's having, other than local, very, very, very local measurements, but not even emissions from the land.
It's interesting you're talking about dividing it up by regions and working on that basis, because something that Phil's been really keen on talking about a lot is the idea of breaking it up by sector as well and applying Drawdown to something like the HVAC&R sector. Could you see that approach working as well?
What's going to fascinate us is what people do with this, as opposed to, we think, or you should, or we could. We have ideas as well. But our primary purpose is to be a living research institute, to refine and improve the research methodology, to enable people to localize it so that it's functionally useful, to connect those people to other universities around the world, because as it becomes more sophisticated and accurate, then best practices can be shared. Someday, maybe, then we take the data that's coming from the local areas and then aggregate it up, and now we start to have a global model that actually means something. A global perspective, a global picture that is years away. We are a response organization as opposed to a promote organization. In other words, we respond to people like you who have ideas, and then we try to determine how it is that we can support you and your ideas, as opposed to, we have an idea, would you take up our idea? And would you take this up? Would you be the person in Australia that does the drawdown, blah, blah, blah? That's not the organization we are. We actually started from the point of view of what does nature do? And what nature does is it self-organizes. Your body self-organizes. Every ecosystem does. The sky, the climate. It's all self-organized. It's not managed. There's nothing in life that's managed. No. And when we manage it, we usually get it wrong. So what we're trying to do is open up the understanding, the data economic research pathways, so that Drawdown is a self-organizing process that occurs on different levels of society, and our job is just to basically get out of the way, but also to feed and serve that in whatever way it manifests.
So, Paul, I've had an initial discussion with Paul Cooper, who's heads up the Sustainable Building Research Centre, and I connected the two of you about how we can do the math. I love the way you just eloquently put it. Simply put it, we did the math. about how we can do that across our sector. And it's certainly something, I guess my question is how can we best create our process which is best informed by the drawdown process? And would drawdown be comfortable with working with us or sponsoring our idea, whatever the process is to help us move along, kick out of the plant room?
Yeah, that's what we're here to do. But we're also here to connect you to others who are doing similar, if not exactly the same, in other locations.
Absolutely.
And we're here to
awesome.
And you'll discover something. We're a coalition. So, with respect to refrigeration, there's people all over who've contacted us.
Yep.
We want to put everybody in touch and see what happens,
Fantastic.
to that, because something will happen that we would never imagine or could possibly, do anything about of any consequence. But you can.
Absolutely.
And so, for example, in buildings, there's so much innovation going on in the built environment. I mean, it's just astonishing. So one of the ways, we have, as you know, the coming attractions, which are valid techniques, practices, technologies, but there isn't sufficient data to measure them, on a global level, so we didn't, but we have a couple hundred more of them. So Drawdown becomes a way of spreading those ideas and getting people here and connected to somebody else who's doing this, and vice versa. So it's a network, and if it operates properly, and we're building a hub, the hub will just work pretty much by itself. It won't be something where we have to meet in the morning and decide what we're going to do about the hub. That would be a bad hub. A good hub is self-organizing.
Yeah.
And then we can all see how it morphs and materializes and transforms and changes and grows and, appendages and new initiatives and so forth, and we can also just put our blinders on and say, my focus is refrigeration. I'm going to stick to it. I want to know, I can't pay attention to these other issues right now because I got my plate full. And that's exactly what the hub is for as well. So people then can gather around where they have the greatest interest and experience, knowledge, and frankly, leverage. Yeah, I think that's what the hub's going to do.
I think certainly from my own personal point of view, Paul, what my passion and skill is in connecting good ideas, putting awesome people together to do awesome things. So that idea of a hub that I can play a role in kind of helping manifest through building the hub.
Exactly. The hub is like the model, which is you can hub it yourself. In other words, you say, I'm hubbing Australia, boom, on whatever it is, and you can grow it, without, our permission or our approval, or no holy water gets sprinkled on it. It just is. We don't trademark the name. It's self-governing.
So is there a way of getting a Paul Hawking quote or endorsement? I don't know what the right word is.
Oh yeah, you can do that. I was a Catholic once. I can
blessed.
Yeah, blessed are my children. Thank you so much, both of you, and stay in touch, and we will be in touch for a long time to come.
Safe travels, Paul.
Okay.
Trip back, all right?
Cheers.
Thanks, so.
See you, mate.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Whew, I felt like I was on a call with Paul Hawken, and I am very chuffed to have been interviewing an interviewer of Paul Hawken, star editor of Drawdown, if I can put it like that.
I totally understand you being starstruck, Mark. Drawdown is really an important piece of work. The more I read it, the more I agree with people like Lee Baker, who would concur with that summation.
Yeah, and talking with her really did help me realize that it's the work we should be focusing on, that I should be focusing on, and of really taking on board that this is just a very early step in this process.
Yeah, there's a lot of hard work to do now, but at least we know where the road is.
Yeah, and what an exciting road it is to be on. We've got the future of humanity before us, Rich, not to be overdramatic, but that's the view I tend to take.
You overdramatic, Mark? Come on, never.
And coming out from the woodwork, we have people from really chronically ignored facets of society, like the wizards in the HVAC plant rooms in all of our big buildings, all over our big cities, joining us on this trip.
I've got a fantastic image of these wizards emerging from the dark now. Thank you, Mark.
See, they would love that. They would absolutely love that.
Just give me a chance to catch up before you get too far ahead there. That's a lot of information to get all at once.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, like I've had a few weeks to start reading up on HVAC&R, and I still don't know a lot. But how about I give you this little mini overview of what that industry is really all about now in easy language to help out.
Okay.
So, Phil, how has mechanical AC and ventilation changed not only the way we live, but how we're living and our mental state?
One of the things I've come to realise after reading a great book called Comfort, Cleanliness and Convenience by Elizabeth Shove in the UK is that mechanical cooling has actually caused us to close up our buildings, make them airtight. And what that's done is actually disengaged us from nature and the outdoors. You think more in the residential space. We no longer have verandas, patios to sit out on that would typically have shaded the house. So we lose that connection to nature, which we're all part of nature. And also you lose that direct connection with your neighbour, which is that human contact, which is a big part of mental health. It's also another big part of my passion as well, having lived with depression for a long time. I'm a huge advocate for human connection, making time for your well-being, and that's another part we want to bring to the work we're doing with this global network.
Right, no tech talk, no chemical talk. Yep, that helped me a lot. I can see why they call it the hidden industry now, Mark.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be looking at a building the same way again after learning this stuff as well, Rich. You know, not without seeing the way it just relies on brute force power use and potential greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, rather than using smart design and a consideration of sustainability. But we can change that. Not you or me, but the HVAC industry themselves.
Yeah, and people in the industry like Phil that are stepping up to be these champions, they're brilliant, and we really need to cheer them on and give them all the motivation they need to keep going, because they're doing great work.
Absolutely. Well, I learned a lot. I had some laughs. I feel inspired, and honestly, I'm a little bit tired after all that.
Oh, is it time to take a nap, Rich?
Well, it could be, yes.
All right, well, if you are going to take a nap, just promise me you can leave the AC off.
All right.
Use an extra blanket instead. You know, I know now after learning this, you know, knowing that a quarter of Australia's power is going to this industry alone, and that a lot of our climate polluting emissions are coming from it as well. Like, I know I'd rather use an extra blanket at night than use my AC. I'd rather wrap an extra blanket on me than a blanket of emissions around our planet.
You've converted me, Mark. Yep. So would I. And with that, folks, have a great week. Thank you for joining us, and keep well in these extraordinary times.
We hope you're liking the show as much as we're enjoying making it. It would mean so much to us if you could leave a rating and review for the show on iTunes. This will really help other people find the show. We're after a few really good reviews to use in our press kit we're building to help us spread the word about the show to environmental groups and organizations all over Australia that we'd love to work with in future. So if you could spare just a few moments of your time and go to the link in the show notes, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Now, we've got some credits for you, some people we need to thank, but before we get to there, I just want to let you know that Climactic is now on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and everywhere you get podcasts. So we can now finally say, tell your friends they can find Climactic wherever they listen to shows. Thanks to our producer, Caleb Fidicaro, our designer, Abigail Hawkins.
And I'd like to thank Greg Grassi for all the music on Climactic, and Gretchen Miller, our senior advisor.
Thanks so much to Phil Wilkinson for being an amazing host this week and opening the door for us to be in touch with Project Drawdown. We got tweeted about by Project Drawdown this week, so it's a big moment for us, and let's keep that momentum going. So from me, thank you so much, folks, and have a great week.
And from me too. Thank you very much.
The Climactic Collective.